Are you feeling stifled, worn out, or just bored with your 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job? I want you to know that you're not alone. I was there too till I started asking and wondering if there was another way to live and work where I could actually be more of me. In this episode, I bring to you real conversations with real people who have chosen to step out of their 9 to 5 employment and create a life for themselves that is more in line with their inner rhythm. Good morning, Shweta.
Hi, Ramya.
Thank you for coming aboard this series as a guest. And I'm so delighted to be reconnecting with you and to have this chance to, take our audience through your story, through your journey, which I think is really fascinating. And I know you, but nobody else does. So I'm going to ask you to just take us back and take us through your journey chronologically, right from your IMA days or even before that, if you want. And let's start from there. When you first started thinking about work.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's such a pleasure, and I hope it's helpful for your listeners. Um, so my journey, I think the relevant part of it starts just before IMA. Or actually, I did my undergrad in psychology because I was always very interested in people, how people think, how they learn, why they behave in ways that they do. And and my whole sort of career plan was that I would, get into HR, and that would be my sort of corporate. I always wanted to be financially independent, and so that was sort of the plan. And then, in the break between college and IMA, I went on this summer camp, which made me rethink a lot of things. So this was a summer camp for little children, and just in 1 week, I saw them grow and learn so much about, and it was in areas that are really meaningful in terms of self-confidence, ability to reflect, ability to kind of push your boundaries.
So you were volunteering in the camp?
I was one of the adults.
Okay, yes. You were one of the adults.
Yeah, yes. And it was just fascinating. And from there started my interest in sort of learning, and how do you create learning that's meaningful and not just like rote based, or not just based on whatever syllabus that needs to be covered, etc. And so in some sense, the seed was planted, and I knew I was going to come back to this. Anyway, post IMA, I joined BCG, and spent a couple of years in consulting, and it was an amazing start to a career, in the fact that it offered me the ability to work with CEOs and be a trusted advisor to them. I mean, one can't ask for a more sort of exciting start. But somewhere I kept feeling a disconnect between what I was really drawn to, passionate about, which was this whole space about learning and meaningful education. And so fairly early on, I decided to switch tracks and joined an education startup. The same organization actually that had organized the summer camp is now working with schools.
And what is the name of this organization?
It's now called Exceed. At that time, it was called iDiscover, right? Mm-hmm. And I spent almost a decade there. Our business model changed, but later on, what we were doing was really working with schools on helping them sort of implement more meaningful ways of learning, and doing it in a way that was scalable, and that allowed many schools to adopt their way of teaching and learning. And so I was there for almost a decade, and then I thought, why not take some of this learning to the government school system, because that's where we're really lagging behind. And I joined a nonprofit that was, again, just starting out. It was called the Education Alliance. And the idea was to create partnerships between government and the nonprofit sector to improve quality of education. So I spent a few years there really building out, their programs, their team, all of that. And then I actually went back to BCG. They now had a social impact practice that was working on education reform with government, and this was sort of large scale change within government systems. And so it seemed like absolutely the ideal sort of fit for what I'd been wanting to do and my whole journey so far. And so that's where I went and did this amazing project with the Niti Aayog and the government of Madhya Pradesh. There were some other states involved as well, but my role was more Madhya Pradesh focused. Working, sort of with senior government officials on how to really reinvent education in the state.
And was this about the time you also upgraded yourself? I think you did some courses around education in you studied, right?
Very early on. That was almost at the beginning of my iDiscover stint. I did a master's in education. I went abroad for doing that, and then throughout I sort of focused on roles that kind of helped me to blend my technical understanding of education and learning with my business understanding. So that was fairly early on in my career. And but the shift I made actually through this journey was from focusing on the classroom and the microcosm to more large scale and more policy and thinking about it from a much more top down view than a bottom up view. And then
after this phase, you were still looking at education, but not interacting directly with the learners, but more at a systemic level, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, I was actually forced to take a break because I just got burnt out. And that's when I really sort of took quite a lot of time to figure out what do I do next. Because in some sense,
Shweta, so tell us more about this, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, because a lot of us get burnt out. Sometimes in smaller degrees, sometimes in larger degrees, sometimes again and again. And many times we don't even recognize, and I speak for myself here and, people I've met and interacted with, very often we don't even catch the signs of burnout before it becomes really big. So, so how was it for you and how did you identify it and how did you recognize that?
No, and I think it's, you said it to the extent I'm comfortable. I think it's a very important topic to speak about because, like you said, it's common and so many of us don't even catch it. So in my case, how it started manifesting was that I started finding, so one was physical fatigue, which started feeling more and more and more. But more than that, what really stood out for me was the fact that I just felt my brain was not working the way it usually does. So something which was like a simple decision felt like a very complex thing to decide, or I would find myself just feeling frozen, or overwhelmed in some sense, and the degree of response was totally disproportionate to sort of the stimulus. And so I actually spoke to a friend of mine, a very close friend, who's also, because I did psychology, all my friends are experts, so they're therapists.
Benefits of the network here, right? Yeah.
So, the college professors and therapists and researchers and stuff like that. So I spoke to her and I said, this is what's happening. And she said, these are all symptoms of burnout. I wouldn't have identified it actually if I hadn't spoken to her. And then I did a lot of research and I figured that, it takes time to get out of burnout. And I tried to take a small break. It didn't really help me. And then I decided to just kind of take a step back and just give it the time it does. And then, figure out the next step. So
Shweta, thank you for sharing this so much. I'm just going to sort of repeat for myself and, for others listening, some very things that I think is very valuable in what you shared, which is really about deciding, making that commitment to give yourself the time that it's going to take. Because we don't know what that time is going to be upfront. And that's a commitment. That's actually a very bold and brave and kind commitment to make to oneself. And I'm so glad you made it. And I also, really love your sharing of this because, you're someone who was working in an area that you were really excited about. You were really passionate. You were driven. It's beautiful. You made those changes already. And, just recognizing and acknowledging, at least like for me, it's taken some time, that even when you're working somewhere where your heart is in it, the meaning, the purpose, even there we can get burnout. And very often it's like, what you mentioned, the physical instrument, and even the brain is actually a physical instrument at the end of the day, and that they have their capacities, and we might have just stretched and driven them beyond a point, and then giving it the time recovered needed for the recovery and nurturing. And I'm so glad you did that. But yeah, take us. So were there also people, you did mention that you had friends that you could reach out to who helped you, diagnose, and if I use that word, right, recognize the signs of burnout. But what else helped you during this recovery phase? Were there other people? Were there books you read, coaches, mentors, things that you did on yourself, rituals that you created? Because we could definitely take a leaf out of, what it takes after, once we recognize the signs of burnout.
So I think, initially, so one of the things my friend actually told me was try and do things which help your mind and body be in the same place, like knitting. I remember the
Place or place?
Same place.
Place. Okay.
Same place.
Place.
And she gave the example of knitting because she's like, it's right there. And a lot of the work I was doing, my team was in a different city and I was in a different city. And she was like, just that fracturing in some sense. And
wow.
imagine the pandemic, right?
Shweta, yeah, let's pause there, because that's happening to all of us now, right? Like right now, I'm sitting here, but my mind is with you. And we're having that conversation. And so much of my work and of a lot of our work is where our body and mind are in different places.
Absolutely. And then it sheds some light on this whole Zoom fatigue and all of that, right? Because in some sense, it is more tiring than a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
Because you're in different places. And so she said it's therapeutic to do things like that. So while I didn't do any of these, but knitting, gardening, cooking, these are things that get your mind and body in the same place. What I did do, I had to find something that I like. All of these sounded very scary to me at that time. I love reading, but like I told you, even my brain was sort of, it wasn't really working like it used to. And even though I've read all my life at that time, I would look at a normal adult book and I would feel overwhelmed. So I started with children's books. I started reading my children's books, and I enjoyed them so much, and it started kind of, making me feel better. I did lots of learning. So one of the things which, I wanted to do was just get some space and distance. And because I was on a complete break, I thought, there wouldn't be a better opportunity. My husband was also planning a break around the same time. And I said, somebody told me about, someone they knew who had shifted to Bali for 6 months, and their children went to school in Bali, and they just lived in Bali for 6 months, and then they came back. It's like, this is such a wonderful plan. So of course, I had no idea where to start, but it was the second half of the year, and I was like, I want to go to a place where it's not going to be super cold, and which is different enough from here. So let's look at anything in the southern hemisphere. And then I had this friend from Harvard, which is where I'd studied my education masters, who lived in Chile. So I was like, okay, let's go to Chile. And I told my husband, let's go to Chile for 3 months. He was like, 3 months? That sounds too daunting. So we finally landed at 5 weeks. And at that time, there were these protests and all happening in Chile. So our itinerary changed and became a Latin American.
You had children also by then?
We had children. We had children who were in school, and we just decided that they are young enough. They were in grade 1 and 3. We decided they're young enough to miss school. I mean, there's no big deal in missing grade 1 and 3. We can learn a lot more from just, such an amazing experience. So I spent a lot of time just trip planning and, thinking about like making the choices around where we wanted to go. We started learning the language. And the way we did this whole trip was very different from anything I had ever done before. It was like we did a little bit of touristy stuff, but a lot more of it was slower travel. It was more immersive travel, which is why we decided to learn the language before going. I mean, whatever little bit.
Wow. So if I were to sort of just, understand what's happening to your brain here, and tell me if my guesswork is going out completely, tangential, but I just feel like your brain that was not wanting to read the adult books and engage itself in work has now got very excited in the trip planning and learning of new languages. And there's something, your brain is coming alive again.
Yeah, absolutely. Started coming alive again. I did not put any pressure on myself of finding what is the next thing to do, or like I said, okay, we'll come to that when it's the right time, and I just trusted that I will know when it's the right time, and I just focused on doing things which were fun, which utilized the time off in some sense. That's the productive mindset.
And I liked what you said, even earlier, where when your friend suggested knitting, gardening, and different things, you said, well, but it has to be something I like. So that's something you've not compromised on. And yeah, that's lovely, keeping that thread.
And I think the other thing which which I started doing was I did some amount of learning. Like I did these I did courses and things I was interested in. So I did this Yale program, the Science of Wellbeing one. I did something on venture investing. So these were just topics I was curious about. And later, somewhere I read in, from somewhere, someone who talks a lot about Ayurveda, that actually learning is a great path to recovery. I don't remember the technical details, but things started falling in place.
It is, yeah. And Shweta, and I just want to sort of tie this in, because I know what's coming in the future in your life's journey, and what's beautiful for me to recognize and acknowledge here is that when you started doing all these courses, you didn't know what's going to unfold as a result of all of that, and you were just picking courses based on your interest and what you were curious about, and yeah. And they've now turned into your work.
So one of the interesting things, actually, you were talking about books and resources. One of the books which I found very helpful was Working Identity by Ramya Ranganathan. And one of the ideas that she talked about was just, crafting small experiments. So some of these courses and all were also coming from that lens that, I don't know what might click. And
just prototyping it out, and
just trying out different things and seeing where it goes, and without
it's like the fitting rooms we have in shops, right, where you try on the dress and see how it feels before you actually decide to put your money into it.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's what I was doing in that time. And I think it took me about 6 months, perhaps. And that was also, I think by the time I came back from my trip, it was about 6 months. And that's when I felt ready to say, okay, now let's think about what next.
Shweta, this trip that you took to Chile, and I'm just going to spend some time on it, because I think that's a possibility for, for anyone listening to think of trips that they would want to do. And these could be little trips with, and so just want to spend some time on it, because it seems like such a beautiful, I don't know what word I want to use, because cocoon still seems protective, but it almost is like an opposite of a cocoon. An open experimental playground where you can grow new wings, have new experiences, new language, new people, new culture, and in that way birth a new you. And a lot of people think this is very difficult to do, and I know logistically it can be difficult. And what I admire is that you did it with your husband and 2 kids. So how was it? Like, what were the resistances or roadblocks or challenges that came in the way of planning even this little experimental trip? How did you overcome it, and how do you feel about it now?
Yeah.
And what were the pluses and minuses, if there were, for you and your family?
Yeah. Honestly, Ramya, it was, I think, one of the most favorite memories I have, like family memories I have. And, especially given the timing, this was Jan of 2020, like December 2019 and Jan 2020. And given what happened right after, I'm so happy that we did it. And, we did it when we did it.
This is just before COVID.
Yeah, this was just before COVID. We came back in the end of January. And the world turned upside down in March.
Wow.
So, and it felt so good to have done that and not left it pending like a bucket list item.
Yeah.
And in terms of resistances, I think there were a couple. One was, obviously, like I said, my husband and I both took this break at the same time. And that was a bit scary. And in some sense, it was precipitated by the trip. While my husband had always been planning to quit, he wasn't sure of the timing. And, it was I who said that, look, you will never get a chance like this again. The children will only get older, it will only get harder to take them out of school. I'm already on a break. When can we do something like this when we're working? So I think that was one. And then, I think once we overcame that, financially, of course, also, like, I started with the 3 months idea.
Yeah, because you're already, on a break. And
yeah. And so the reason why we sort of made it shorter was that, okay, it has to be some kind of manageable budget. And there are 4 people. And I'm glad we made it shorter. Otherwise, we would be stuck in Latin America for all of COVID time.
Good thing, bad thing, who knows?
Yeah. So, and then, we've never been luxury travelers or whatever. So we knew that, okay, we can work. We didn't have a very specific budget in mind, but we knew that we would make choices which were, not extravagant and, simple. And the idea was really to spend time soaking the culture. And so, there were like a few extravagances. Like there was in the whole 5-week trip, there was one time we spent a night in a Holiday Inn. Like that was the best hotel we stayed at, and I had access to a swimming pool because it was right next to the airport, and we had a really early morning flight. But otherwise, we stayed at small bed and breakfasts. We stayed with a local family in 2 places, and I think honestly, I feel like so many people think about these things, but it's just a matter of just doing it.
Doing it, right?
Yeah. And it, for us, it was Latin America, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be, I don't know, it can be a state or a small city in India. And I think like so many people have done that too, right?
And the takeaways from that trip or holiday for you have been on multiple dimensions.
Absolutely. I think it gave me such a refresh, and it gave me distance to really think about what's important to me. And I think I live my life quite differently. It's not just the trip, it's also everything that happened after that, my journey after that. But it was sort of the
space to process it, right, in some ways. And did the kids love it or like it?
Oh, yes. The kids actually were really amazing throughout, and we had so many middle of the night, early morning flights. We had all kinds of crazy, like most of it was slow, but there were some parts which were like 10 flights in 10 days. Not exactly, but some crazy stuff. They were good throughout, and we actually went and really soaked it in. They drew about their experiences, they wrote about their experiences. It was such amazing family time. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I really wanted to sort of get that out of you because, as a mother, I know how much sometimes you can, oh my God, how will I do this with my kid? And how will I do this? And how will I pull it off? And yet, once you do you have all the experiences. And then what happened after that, Shweta, when you came back?
Yeah. So when I came back, I was continuing this whole experimentation and doing these little courses and stuff like that. And one of the things that had been on my mind for some time, like for many years actually, at the back of my mind was coaching. And so I enrolled in a coaching course also, just as one more of the many courses I was doing. And that turned out to be just amazing. So, one, it helped me articulate sort of what was most important to me. And I had been trying to do that anyway during this time, but it helped me sort of put words to it, put it on a piece of paper, kind of dimensionalize it in some sense. And the other was that, as part of the course, we had to do some practice conversations and stuff like that. You've done that as well. And it was just, like the first conversation I did, I still remember the whole day I walked around with this glowing feeling. And, I was like, wow, like, this is so amazing. This is what I should be
Glow
doing.
inside Shweta is back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like while I've done many courses, again, it was just following my curiosity. This one was like, okay, fine, now this is it.
And I just want to sort of now put that a bit in bold and highlights and italics and, which is something that, again, seems to be quite true, which is sometimes we need to try a couple of different things or many different things for some people. And one of them will sort of click and show you your next phase in your, what you want to be doing. And so to keep at it till you sort of find that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so many people sort of put so much undue pressure saying, oh, I don't know what my passion is, or I don't know what my purpose is. But in some sense, it's a matter of like you won't know till you do things.
You wouldn't know, right? So if I had interviewed you before you did the coaching program, you would have been a very, I don't know, right? Because how would you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so one of the thoughts I even entertained during the trip, I read about families that only travel and they blog about their travel, and that's how they live. And I was just thinking that I would not even have known about that unless I had done this trip. And we actually talked about our trip and stuff like that. But again, I think just trying things which are a little bit out there, maybe like, a little bit different from our normal reality, just it opened my mind to so many possibilities.
And then how did you take that forward?
Yeah, so at the time that I did the course was just when the pandemic started, and I had been thinking about, okay, am I going to look for another job and do some of this side by side, or do I just want to jump into it full time? And after the course, I was like, you know what, the world outside has anyway slowed down. Let me just jump into it for some time, see how it goes, see where it goes, and then we'll decide. Because anyway, so during this time, there were people reaching out for jobs and roles and stuff like that. And obviously, those were mostly related to what I had done so far in the education space. And I was just realizing that, I mean, I don't know if it was connected to the burnout or it was just that, I'd already spent 15 years doing that or whatever it was. I just felt that I wasn't feeling excited or energized by even the thought of some of those, futures. And so I said, let me just pursue this future for a little while and we'll take it as it comes. And I think it really helped that the world outside had kind of slowed down. And the beginning of anything is slow, right? But it kind of synced with what was happening in the world. And wasn't as slow as I expected it to be, actually. And so I started coaching and I started working with people.
So Shweta, talking a little more about, slowing down. and taking it from there. So just going to sort of ask you how it was for you here in terms of, you already have this credibility and expertise in the space of education, and you've done all this work. And like you said, there were people reaching out with offers. So that's a space where you sort of know that you have the capabilities and credentials, and it's a known space. And then this is the unknown space where you've just done one course, you've never been a coach before, and you had these few conversations that you've liked in the trial room, and you're making that choice. And I heard you use two words that were excitement and energized, as almost as parameters to say, you know what, there are all these people reaching out with offers in this space where I have my degrees from Harvard, from IIM, from, I have my BCG experience, and I have this, like, I'm an expert and getting offers. And then I have this other new space. I'm not an expert. I have a few sample conversations and a tug of the heart. And I'm using excitement and energized as parameters to say no to this and say yes to this. So, how easy was that for you? From your heart, I guess it's a yes, but did your mind, did your judgment, the voices of judgment, did your brain kick in at any point, as a resistance? And were there also other people around you? Were you at a stage by that time where you had sort of stopped talking to people around you? Or did you still have what a lot of us have, which is, words and voices of caution telling you, no, you need to do what you're good at because you're good at it. This is also a strength.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, Ramya. And I think having told a bit of my story, maybe you've also picked up the fact that in some sense, I'm the kind of person who's happy to drop things and run after something that looks exciting. So, the fact that like I chucked the BCG job like the first time to go after an education career. And,
Yeah, some people would call you crazy for doing that, right?
Absolutely. And the first
and did they?
I mean, there were some people who did. And, at that time it was early enough in my career that I was like, whatever, we'll see. I didn't have any financial obligations at that time. I was 24 years old, I think. Like the trip, right? Not too many people do these kind of things. So I think obviously, so just before I did the course, when I was thinking about doing the course, when I was thinking about coaching, I think my rational mind was much louder. And, there was this whole thing that I had always told myself, I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I'm never going to be working alone. I'll always be working for someone. I'll always be working for a salary. This was my narrative. And so, I was thinking about, like I said, okay, maybe I'll take a job and do some coaching on the side. And, till I, like you said, develop the expertise, develop enough confidence. This is actually what I want to go after. It's not just a few sample conversations, etc., etc. But when I did that course, that immersive experience and that pull of the heart, it kind of just overshadowed the rational voice in some sense. And I think the other thing that happened also was that, so there was probably one job that I was even halfway considering. And when the lockdown happened and, companies were so badly hit, that conversation got put on the back burner. I was like, perfect. Now I don't even have a choice. Yeah. Like, I don't even need to sort of
justify to myself.
Exactly. And so yeah, and I kind of, yeah, I think the fact that because of the lockdown, because of the pandemic, expenses went way down. Suddenly we weren't really spending on anything. We weren't going out. We weren't feeling like, oh, there are things we need to do or we have to do for which we need the salary.
Anyway, sitting at home, right? Yeah.
So I think, like, as I look back, I think this whole thing that the universe conspires to make things happen, in some sense, I feel like that happened to me.
Yeah, the lockdown also supported you in.
Lockdown supported me, the disappearance of that job supported me. And
Nice.
Yeah.
And I picked up one word that you said, which was in your rational mind, that I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. Is that what you said, right?
Yeah.
And I hear that from a lot of people. And I used to feel that way about myself also. Because, we just grew up, believing that, oh, it's them and it's us and I'm not. There are certain people out there cut out and born to be entrepreneurs, but I'm not that. So how has that changed now? And because I know you are an entrepreneur, and what helped in that transition?
So I think one is, I think, just doing it, like I said, just kind of
getting that new experience inside.
Yeah, and again, the beginning of it was sort of an experiment, but as I sort of developed it, more people sort of came on board. It became more and more real, and I could see that I was enjoying it. I was enjoying the creation, the ability to kind of define, where things go, to kind of decide what pace I want to go at, to decide what standards I want to kind of adhere to. And I just felt so much more in control.
Wonderful. So Shweta, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you say these things: make my choices, decide what I want to do, decide the pace I want to do it at, be in control. And actually, all these are elements of entrepreneurship, right? And you're sort of picking on the individual elements that work for you. And without that whole label, when you use entrepreneurship just as a label, and we've been told and heard, you have to be like this, you have to be like that, you have to it's just such a lie, because it's just, a label. And within it are some beautiful elements, which actually can be very much you, very much Shweta. And you could discard the other elements, which are not Shweta. Like, along with entrepreneurship is this whole, the scale up, the, what's that? It's IPO, no, not IPO, the investor pitch, and the whole Shark Tank kind of thing. And those are different models, right? And so just so you are an entrepreneur, but in your own way, and redefining that for yourself.
And I think, the stereotypes I had in my own head.
Yeah, stereotypes.
What about sort of, the fact that, okay, it requires like some kind of crazy resilience, because it requires absolutely sort of giving up on everything else.
Just the hustle mode.
The hustle, exactly what you said, right? Having investors breathing down your neck in terms of how fast you need to grow. And I realized that, not all the stereotypes are even true. And like you said, as I sort of, as this company became beyond me and other people came on board and we started talking about, what we want to build. One of the things, for example, when we were incorporating the company and deciding what company structure it should take, one of the discussions we had was, if we need external funding, there's a particular kind of structure. And we said, I don't think we want to go that route at all, at least not for the foreseeable future. And so, just the fact you can consciously and intentionally decide, it doesn't have to follow the stereotype, or it doesn't all have to look the same.
Yeah.
I think
consciously and intentionally. I love those words. And that's, and that those are your strengths, right? As you make your way into an area which was something that your brain had decided not for me, but you still go into it consciously with intention, staying true to what you want to create and actually becoming an entrepreneur by doing that. So I'm so proud of you, and that's so nice. And I just sort of want to generalize that a bit here and leave that as a possibility for all of us to do those things that we might have thought that we can't do, but actually walking into it in our way and then therefore doing it and becoming it. So thank you so much for that literal, case study from your life. And so, if you look back at your 40 years or 30 years, I want to ask you if there was a time that was particularly difficult or challenging for you in terms of, if you look at your entire career, and what was that and how did you get through it? And just so that if someone else is going through a challenging time that somewhat resembles that, they have, another story to look to.
Yeah. So I think, it may be the recency effect, but I think not just professionally, I think one of the hardest times I've gone through in my life has been the second wave. And we had this new business, and that was really the last thing on our minds, because we just went through a really bad time in the second wave. We lost lots of members of our family, friends, and that was really, really hard. Like in the span of 1 month, I lost 5 really close loved ones. And I myself had COVID, and there were lots of physical after effects, but also just the emotional, I think the trauma of the loss, but also just the trauma of that entire period, of scrambling for resources, of not being able to get the care that your loved one needed. I think that was just, it felt like war. It felt like you were in a war zone and no lot of choice. Those 2 months, obviously, there was new work happening. But even after that, once the peak of that kind of subsided, I don't know if I had long COVID, but I had lots of lingering symptoms. I had, again, in some sense, some similar stuff to the burnout in terms of, physical fatigue, mental overwhelm. And there was all this grief I was dealing with. And, in our home, everybody was dealing with so much grief, including the children. And, they were sensitive, on edge. So it was really overwhelming. And I think, again, I don't know if I'm completely out of it yet. It's just been a few months, and I have a feeling that this is, every expert I've talked to has told me that grief never goes away. It's always there. You just learn how to deal with it. But again, I think the one thing that really helped me was taking the time and the space. And, in some sense, while as I was doing this, I set the pace, I chose how fast I want to grow and all of that. There was also, sort of this other pull in terms of, it's not like you're getting a fixed salary. What you put in determines what you get out. And, so if you cannot put in anything, then, you're looking at sort of an empty funnel a few months down the line. So in some sense, it's even harder to step back completely. But I really needed to do that for a little while at least. And, just give myself the space to process everything, give my body the time to feel. And and just become a more, I don't know, like become a presence that is healing for the people around me rather than being completely kind of, uh, you know, ruptured myself.
Wow. I love that, Shweta. I mean, so really, the same approach that you followed during the burnout as well, right? Giving yourself the time and the space that you need to heal. And now, what you've added on, which is obviously reflective of your journey from then to now, is also then looking at how, when you give yourself the time and space to heal, you actually become a presence that's healing and nurturing to others rather than a sinkhole or a ruptured presence that needs to, that would, yeah, pull others into your rupture. And just that acknowledgement itself is, yeah, that's so powerful, and that's such a kindness actually. So thank you for sharing that. And kindness with courage, and obviously with wisdom, because without the time and space we couldn't heal, and we would be then in that hamster wheel but in a ruptured format and not helping ourselves or anyone else. So thank you for that, just tying it in together so nicely. And I could go on with this conversation, but yeah, we have to end it somewhere. But before we end it, I want you to think of what would be your top three pieces of advice, if I were to use the word advice, or suggestions that you have for anyone who's currently in an employed job, in a 9 to 5 job. So think back about your time at BCG perhaps, and where you're working, and there's a part of their mind that is tempted or thinking of a possibility outside of that, and they're toying or flirting with that possibility, but there are all these other voices and fears and doubts. So what would your advice to such a person be? Three of them.
Yeah. So I think the first would be to just focus on self-awareness. I think really being able to lay out what's most important to you. And I think that's where sort of the exercise in the coaching program helped me. And so it may have structure. I know a lot of people are able to do it themselves, like create some sort of framework and do it. But really starting from that understanding of what you're seeking in life and who you really are. The second, I think, would be, and we've talked about this, really running experiments and just doing some stuff that may feel a little bit like almost impossible, but sometimes we make it impossible in our own head.
Yeah, or alien because you've not done it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third would be that, have some kind of plan around the financials. And there I would say start sort of first principles, because a lot of times the way people think about it is, okay, I have this salary and, what can I do that will be equal to this salary? How I did it at least was I said, okay, what is important to me in life? Where are the places where I know that, I don't want to compromise? And so basis that, how much do I need? And that's very different a number from what we think we need when we tie ourselves to certain things that we get used to. So I knew that, okay, I don't want to cut on travel, but I know that it's okay, I don't care about fancy cars or branded clothes, and so I know that consciously I'm fine making these choices.
And like your Chile experience showed you, travel itself has different avatars and versions, right? Absolutely. There's a luxury travel, expensive travel, and there can be a budget travel as well.
Absolutely. And also, it can take different forms. One is, cutting back, thinking about expenses and all of that. But also it could be, becoming more comfortable with living on a spouse's income, if that's what the plan is going to be, or of savings. I think all of these, again, can be options, but we need to be comfortable in our heads with the option that we're choosing. And kind of again go into it consciously. So yeah, I think those are my three top.
Yeah, so really, your last point is about bringing that consciousness and intention, even as you're creating your own level of this is what I need as a buffer, and not just taking your previous monthly expense and just, drawing the line from there and moving upwards. So thank you so much, Shweta. Thank you for this conversation, for coming in with your complete presence, for bringing in consciousness and intentionality into every step of literally crafting your life, whether it's looking or stepping into a new domain like becoming an entrepreneur, or whether it's leaving a space and a job where you have experience but it's no longer exciting, and so many takeaways, and thank you, deep gratitude for that.
Thank you,
Wish you all
Ramya.
the best.
We enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, thank you for this time and space.
Bye-bye. If you are someone who's looking to craft your life and work in a way that is more in line with your inner rhythm, then do visit my website, www.craftingourlives.com. You'll find it in the description, because I have a host of resources put together for you, and this is based on 20 years of my own research and work with people as a coach in this area. I also have a free newsletter, so your starting points should be to sign up for my newsletter, subscribe to this channel to stay updated for further videos, and to go on to the edX site and look for my free MOOC course there titled Crafting Realities, Work, Happiness and Meaning, and then reach out to me if you need further assistance. I also offer private coaching, as well as I run group coaching sessions, and I also conduct residential retreats, and you can find all that information on my website or in the newsletter as and when we announce it.